The lights of Manhattan were still shining when Daniel Cruz heard the laughter echoing behind him. "Look, the delivery hero is here." The words cut deeper than the cold of the dawn. At that moment, Daniel didn't reply. He just lowered his head and went on with the delivery. Nobody imagined that, just a few hours later, the poor deliveryman they all mocked would be the only one capable of saving a life. If this twist touched you, show your support. Leave a like and subscribe to follow this real and transformative story. Daniel Cruz pushed open the heavy door of a skyscraper lobby in Midtown Manhattan, with his hands full of 2 bags of food. The warmth coming from the containers contrasted with the biting cold of the street still clinging to his coat. The clock on his phone read 8:47 p.m. It was just another delivery for him, but for the residents of that luxurious building it was a silent spectacle of disdain. The marble gleamed under the golden lights of the hall, reflecting the hurried steps of executives in impeccable suits. Daniel, in worn jeans and a faded Uber Eats jacket, looked like an intruder in that gleaming scene. He walked to the reception desk and tried to check in, but the doorman just raised his hand, asking him to wait. The man typed something on the computer unhurried, as if Daniel had all the time in the world. Behind him, a group of young men in suits stepped out of the elevator. They carried wine glasses, laughed loudly, and talked about business that sounded like another language. One of them, spotting Daniel standing there, murmured loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Look, our hunger savior has arrived, the delivery hero." The laughter echoed through the space. Another added, "Hey champ, don't forget the napkins, we can't stain the crystal table." The doorman, instead of reprimanding them, gave a discreet smile, almost complicit. Daniel took a deep breath. He didn't respond, didn't look back. He just adjusted his backpack and waited for permission to go up. Every second standing there, the weight of invisibility grew more suffocating. He knew that for those men, he was nothing more than a temporary bag carrier, disposable, a face that dissolves the moment the door closes. When he finally got to go up, he walked into the elevator and looked at his own reflection in the mirror. His tired eyes betrayed a routine of 12 hours pedaling across the city. There was no room for vanity, nor for rest. And yet, behind that weary expression, a flame of dignity still burned, one he refused to let go out. He thought of his mother, who lived in San Antonio, Texas, and of the voice messages she sent asking him to eat properly. He thought of his 4-year-old daughter he only saw in video calls, living with his ex-wife in Queens. The elevator doors opened. In the elegant hallway, he headed to the penthouse. The resident received the food without a thank you, already holding the card to sign. Daniel said good night, quietly, but no reply came. Just the sound of the door closing firmly. Back on the streets, the contrast was brutal. The cold was punishing, horns blared, sirens cut through the air. The glowing billboards of Times Square flashed like a permanent show. But for Daniel, it was just the backdrop of his daily battle. He got on his bike, checked the next order on the app. Pharmacy, a few blocks away. He took a deep breath, adjusted his gloves, and kept pedaling. As he crossed 8th Avenue, he thought about how every delivery was a test of endurance, not just physical, but emotional too. How many times had he swallowed insults without replying? How many times had he been treated like part of the urban furniture, a blur with a green backpack rushing past? He remembered when he first arrived in New York 3 years ago, believing the city was full of opportunities. Now he realized that the same city could also crush dreams with the weight of indifference. At the pharmacy, Daniel picked up the next order, a box of insulin. The clerk just scanned the code and handed it over without lifting his eyes. The rush of the night made everything seem mechanical. Daniel carefully placed the package in his bag and started the road to East 56th Street. The traffic was heavier than usual. The cold made drivers honk impatiently. He weaved through alleys, crossed intersections before the red light caught him. His body already knew every street, every pothole in the asphalt. The city was a chessboard, and he crossed it like a tireless piece, always one move behind the next call. Yet this delivery carried a different weight. It wasn't just sushi, pizza, or burgers. It was insulin. He thought of how his own mother depended on daily medication for high blood pressure, and how a box like that could mean the line between life and risk. The memory made him pedal faster, even with his muscles already burning from exhaustion. When he arrived at the address, he noticed the building was even more luxurious than the previous one. 2 doormen were inside, laughing at something on their phones. Daniel knocked on the glass, and they took a few seconds before opening the door. The look of disdain was the same, from head to toe, as if they were judging not just his clothes, but his entire existence. Delivery for the 23rd floor. Daniel showed the app. Wait a moment. The man adjusted his tie and pointed to a nearby armchair, not bothering to hide the tone of command. Daniel frowned. It's medication. It needs to get there quickly. Everyone here thinks what they're bringing is urgent. The doorman turned his eyes back to the computer screen. The service elevator is under maintenance, and the freight elevator is busy. You'll have to wait. The words fell like stones. Daniel looked around. The marble floor reflected the golden chandeliers. Residents passed carrying expensive shopping bags, but no one seemed to see him. It was as if he were part of the unwanted decoration, someone who only crossed that space to disappear right after. He sat down in the armchair, uncomfortable. The box of insulin rested on his lap, light in weight, but immense in meaning. He knew what he held. He knew that, for the person waiting, every minute could be precious. And still he was forced to wait as if it didn't matter. Two young men were leaving the building's lobby with wine glasses in hand. One of them discreetly pointed at Daniel and said in a low voice, "Dude, look at that. Apps deliver even pharmacy stuff now. Just call and someone desperate shows up to run up 20 floors. And probably for a handful of change." The other laughed. Daniel lowered his eyes. He wanted to ignore it, but the humiliation came not only from the words but from the way they laughed, as if his life were a joke. The clock on his phone kept ticking. 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. He stood up and returned to the desk. "I need to go up. Seriously, it's insulin." The doorman huffed. "I already told you the elevator is busy. If you want, you can leave it here and I'll send someone when it's free." Daniel swallowed hard. "I can't leave it. I need to deliver it in person." The doorman stared at him as if dealing with a stubborn child. "You're disrupting the flow. Sit down again." The weight of indifference piled up. Daniel looked at the box on his lap and thought of his mother, who so many times had needed medicine. He thought of what it would be like if someone treated her life with the same neglect. Anger throbbed inside, but he took a deep breath. He couldn't lose his temper. Time kept moving. Outside, traffic roared. Inside, everything felt still, suffocating. Daniel felt the tension rise like a rope about to snap. The cruelest part wasn't the weight. It was the fact that no one there believed him. To everyone, he was just a pushy delivery man, incapable of understanding the building rules. An elegant lady walked by holding a small dog. Noticing Daniel with the box, she arched her eyebrows. "Still here?" she murmured, almost amused. "This must be a very important delivery." He answered only with a nod. It wasn't worth explaining. 25 minutes. Daniel was standing now, pacing back and forth, trying to control his anxiety. Each step echoed through the silent lobby. The doorman sighed loudly, as if tired just from seeing him insist. It was at that moment the building trembled slightly. The chandelier lights flickered. A murmur swept through the lobby. The doorman raised his eyes, surprised. Daniel pressed the box against his chest instinctively. The lights came back to normal in seconds, but the sense of foreboding remained. Something was about to happen. A resident approached the desk, irritated. "The elevators are too slow tonight. What's going on?" "Maintenance," replied the doorman curtly. Daniel watched everything in silence. The time had already passed 30 minutes. He knew he couldn't wait much longer. But how to go up? The stairs were restricted, locked with a magnetic key. He depended on an authorization no one seemed willing to give. He sat again, resting his elbows on his knees. Cold sweat trickled down his neck, despite the icy air conditioning. The city didn't forgive the weak, he knew. But that night, it seemed to be testing him beyond his limits. He looked at the door, thought about just leaving. If it were food, maybe he would have. But it wasn't food. It was insulin. The lady needed it. He couldn't give up. The clock's hand kept moving. 40 minutes. Daniel closed his eyes, trying to contain his anger and helplessness. And in that silence, he suddenly heard the most dreaded sound. A sharp crack, followed by the instant blackout of the lights. The building plunged into darkness. Screams echoed through the hallways. The doorman jumped up in panic, banging on the desk in search of a flashlight. The lobby, once imposing, was now nothing but shadows and confused voices. In seconds, the golden glow of the chandelier vanished and the lobby was plunged into darkness. The noise from the street disappeared, replaced by screams, hurried footsteps, and the insistent beeping of emergency alarms. Daniel felt his stomach sink. He held the box of insulin with both hands as if it were the only point of light left. The doorman, once arrogant, was now groping blindly in search of a flashlight. His trembling voice echoed, "Damn, the power's out." Outside, the city also seemed to have stopped. Cars honked desperately, but without traffic lights, everything was jammed. Sirens began to wail in the distance, multiplying like echoes in different directions. New York, always vibrant and bright, had turned into a dark, noisy, vulnerable mass. Residents emerged from elevators stuck between floors, banging on doors and shouting. Some rushed through the lobby in panic, using the weak glow of their cell phones. The air of superiority had vanished. Everyone now seemed the same, frightened, powerless, not knowing what to do. Daniel looked at the emergency stairwell. The door was locked with the same magnetic key that only worked with power. The doorman was trying to use a master key, but his hands trembled. "It won't open. Without power, it won't open," he muttered nervously. Daniel's breathing quickened. He knew what this meant. On the 23rd floor, someone was waiting for that insulin. A frail woman who might already be feeling the effects of not having the medication. Time was running, invisible but relentless. The anger he had been holding back for hours exploded into courage. Daniel approached the doorman. "I need to go up. This box is insulin." "There's no way," the man shouted, lost in the chaos. "You don't understand. The elevators are dead and the stairs are locked." Daniel took a deep breath, trying to hold back the urge to argue. But then a resident, an older man also waiting in the lobby, raised his voice. "He's saying it's medicine. Let him go up the service stairs." The doorman hesitated, but under the pressure and the growing darkness, he gave in. He pulled an old key from his pocket and opened a narrow door beside the desk. "Go through here, but you're on your own." Daniel didn't wait for another word. He went through the door and found a concrete stairwell lit only by a weak emergency bulb that flickered. He inhaled deeply and began to climb. Each step felt heavier than the last. The echo of his footsteps mixed with his quickening breath. By the 10th floor, his legs were already burning. By the 15th, sweat was running down his face despite the cold. By the 20th, his body was screaming to stop. But the memory of the woman and the weight of the box in his hands pushed him upward. On the 23rd floor, he finally reached the metal door. It was locked. Daniel knocked hard, calling out, "Ma'am, I'm the delivery man. I have your insulin." Seconds later, the door opened from inside. A weak voice replied, "I thought you wouldn't make it." She was pale, trembling, leaning against the wall, her tear-filled eyes fixed on the box as if it were salvation itself. Daniel handed over the medicine carefully and she hugged him without thinking. "You saved me." The words were simple, but carried a gratitude he had never heard before. In the hallway, some neighbors were watching the scene. Among them was the man in the silk robe who had mocked him earlier. The arrogant look was gone, replaced by an awkward silence. Someone pulled out a phone and, even with little battery left, filmed Daniel delivering the insulin. The scene would spread in just a few hours, though he didn't know it yet. All that mattered at that moment was the life in front of him, the real impact of what he had done. He sat down for a moment in the corridor, breathing deeply. His muscles burned, his throat ached, but his heart was pounding, not from exhaustion but from meaning. For the first time in a long time, he felt he wasn't invisible. He felt he had done something no one could erase. As he descended back down the stairs, the city still shrouded in darkness. He heard whispered conversations. He climbed 23 floors, just to deliver medicine. Who would do that? Daniel didn't reply. He just kept going down, gripping the handrail firmly. Outside, chaos raged on, but inside him a certainty arose. The night had just changed. Daniel Cruz walked slowly down the stairs, his knees still trembling after climbing 23 floors carrying the insulin. His breathing struggled to settle, but inside the weight wasn't exhaustion. It was something new. In his chest was a feeling he couldn't explain, relief mixed with dignity. For the first time in a long while, he felt he had done something that couldn't be erased by a door slammed in his face. The building's lobby was still shrouded in darkness. Cell phone flashlights lit frightened faces. When Daniel came through the stairwell door, sweaty and breathless. Silence filled the lobby. The doorman, who had earlier treated him as a nuisance, now looked at him with a mix of astonishment and shame. Some residents whispered, "He climbed all the way up there. 23 floors. Just to deliver medicine?" No one laughed this time. A young resident wearing expensive sneakers raised his phone and pointed the camera at Daniel. The small red circle blinked. He was recording. "Hey man, did you really do that? Climbed all that in the dark?" Daniel just nodded, speechless. "That's insane." The guy shook his head. The good kind of insane. Others approached, curious. Daniel tried to leave quickly. He didn't want applause. But the lenses were already following him. A video here, a photo there. The image of the poor delivery man drenched in sweat, holding the empty insulin box, was already spreading without his knowledge. On the street, the city looked like a distorted movie scene. Cars stalled, drivers arguing, people walking with improvised flashlights. The absence of light revealed a raw New York, without glowing shop windows, without facades hiding inequality. It was as if everyone had been leveled by the darkness. Daniel pedaled slowly, weaving past stalled cars. The Uber Eats app still buzzed, offering new orders, but he ignored it. He needed a moment to breathe. He sat on a bench near Central Park, pulled his phone from his pocket, and saw dozens of notifications. He didn't pay much attention at first until he noticed messages from friends and acquaintances. "You're crazy, man. I saw a video of you. Daniel, is that you in that thing at the 56th Street building? They're talking about you on Twitter." He didn't understand immediately. But as he read, more videos came in. Someone had posted on Instagram, "Deliveryman climbs 23 floors during blackout to save elderly woman with insulin." The video showed Daniel entering the hallway sweaty, handing over the box. The woman hugged the medicine with tears in her eyes. The video already had thousands of views. Daniel's hands trembled. He didn't know if it was from the cold or from the avalanche that was starting to form. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the elderly woman who had received the insulin called her daughter. She cried with emotion, telling her that a delivery man had saved her night. The daughter, indignant with the building's neglect and moved by the act, also posted on social media, "This man deserves respect. He brought life back to my mother." His name wasn't in the video, but soon someone discovered it through the app and began tagging, "It's Daniel Cruz, Uber Eats delivery man." With each passing minute, more comments appeared. "This guy is a hero." While some laughed, he climbed 23 floors in the dark. New York needs more Daniels. Daniel still didn't know the scale of it. All he wanted was to finish the night and complete his shift. But the world around him was already changing. In a 24-hour cafe, two young people talked excitedly, showing the video to their friends. In a taxi stuck in traffic, the driver repeated, "Look at this, look at what this guy did." Even some delivery men Daniel only knew by sight began to comment in WhatsApp groups. "Did you see what Cruz did? Climbed all that in the dark for a customer. Has so much respect. This is what we go through every day. Invisible but essential." What had started as just another night of work had turned into a collective narrative. Back on his bike, Daniel rode down 7th Avenue. In front of a store, a group of teenagers recognized him from the video and shouted, "Hey, you're the guy from the video. The stairs guy." Daniel pretended not to hear and pedaled faster. He wasn't used to that kind of attention. To him, he was still just Daniel, the man who pedaled night after night to pay the bills. Yet the city no longer saw him the same way. At the East 56th Street building, residents were still talking about the scene. The man in the silk robe, the one who had mocked him earlier, remained in embarrassed silence. The elderly woman kept repeating to anyone who would listen, "He saved my life. You should thank him instead of laughing." The phrase echoed. For the first time, someone defended a delivery man inside a space where they were usually treated like shadows. By dawn, social media had exploded. Hashtags appeared. #Uber Eats Hero, #23 floors, #NYC Deliveryman. In Facebook delivery groups, posts multiplied with emotional comments from colleagues who saw themselves in his actions. It wasn't just about Daniel. It was about everyone. About every invisible face behind a colorful backpack crossing the city unnoticed. And yet Daniel still pedaled alone, unaware he had become a symbol. For him, the night was still harsh. Aching muscles, biting cold, orders piling up on the app. But in the middle of the darkness, a spark was lit. The city that had mocked him, was beginning to see him in a different light. After the blackout the night before, many were still recovering from the scare. Lights flickered back on in buildings, engines began to roar again, and shop windows lit up as if nothing had happened. New York resumed its hurried routine, but beneath the surface there was a story running faster than the traffic on Fifth Avenue. That of the delivery man who climbed 23 floors in the dark to save an elderly woman with insulin. Daniel Cruz woke up late that morning. He had slept only a few hours in his small rented room in Queens, still feeling the burn of the climb in his legs. His phone buzzed nonstop. He thought it was order notifications, but when he unlocked the screen, he saw a flood of messages. "You're everywhere. I turned on the TV and they were talking about you. Man, you're trending on Twitter." Confused, he opened a link sent by Mike Henderson, a fellow delivery man. It was a video from a local news report. Unlikely hero. Uber Eats delivery man saves elderly woman during blackout. There he was, in shaky cell phone footage, breathless in the hallway, delivering the insulin. Daniel covered his mouth, incredulous. He had never sought fame or applause, he had only done his job. But now the city seemed to have found in him something larger. Not just the man who delivered food or medicine, but the invisible figure that, for one night, everyone finally saw. While gulping down coffee, he received an unexpected call. It was the daughter of the woman he had helped. "Mr. Cruz, this is Helen's daughter. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. My mother is well because of you. I don't know how to repay you." Daniel stammered, awkward. "You don't need to. I just did what was right. What you did was more than right. It was human." When he left home, Daniel noticed the different looks. On the subway, some people whispered and stared at him discreetly. On the way to his bike, 2 teenagers smiled and said, "You're the stairs guy, right? Respect, man." He didn't know how to react. He just waved and kept walking, his face red. On his phone, social media wouldn't stop. A video had already surpassed 500,000 views. Hashtags like #UberEatsHero and #DanielCruz were among the top trending topics. Ordinary people wrote emotional messages. "My dad depends on insulin. I imagine what would have happened without this delivery man. I work for an app too. Seeing this gave me strength to keep going. Finally, someone showing who really carries this city on their back." Even journalists started reaching out. A local TV program wanted to interview him. A radio station offered him a slot to tell his story. Daniel refused at first, shy, but the insistence grew. It was no longer just about him. It was about everyone who wore delivery backpacks and pedaled invisibly through the city. Meanwhile, at the East 56th Street building, residents were still talking. Some tried to downplay it, saying it was just a delivery. But Mrs. Helen's voice was louder than all of them. She came down to the lobby and declared in front of the doormen and neighbors, "This man saved my life. You need to learn to respect the people you ignore every day." The doorman, embarrassed, just lowered his eyes. The man in the silk robe, the one who had mocked Daniel earlier, didn't show up. Shame kept him silent. That same afternoon, Daniel received a notification from Uber Eats. The company had posted on its official Twitter account, "Proud to have delivery partners like Daniel Cruz. Your effort and humanity inspire us all." Thousands of likes poured in within minutes. But the most unexpected gesture was still to come. A group of anonymous entrepreneurs launched an online fundraiser to support Daniel. The description read, "If he climbed 23 floors in the dark to save a life, he deserves to climb even higher in his own dreams." In less than 24 hours, it raised thousands of dollars. When he found out, Daniel was in shock. He immediately thought of the food truck he had always dreamed of starting. He didn't know if he would have the courage to use the money for that. But for the first time, the idea felt possible. At night, when he got back on his bike, the city was lit up again. Billboards glowed, cars honked, people rushed about as usual. New York had resumed its habitual rush, but for Daniel, nothing was the same. Passing through Times Square, he looked at the giant screens. There he was, in a news piece repeating on one of the panels, the image of a breathless, sweaty but determined delivery man holding a small box of insulin. Daniel stopped for a moment, leaned his bike, and watched in silence. People around him also looked and recognized him. A woman said, "That's him. That's the man from TV." He smiled, not knowing where to look. He wanted to be just another face in the crowd, but he couldn't deny it. Something had changed. As he began to pedal again, he thought of his mother in Texas, who would surely cry seeing him in the news. He thought of his daughter in Queens, who would one day ask, "Daddy, was that you who did this?" And for the first time, he would have an answer to be proud of. The cold wind hit his face, but Daniel felt his heart warm. The city could go back to laughing, mocking, ignoring. But now there was a mark impossible to erase. Everyone knew who the delivery man was who had refused to be invisible. And even if life remained harsh, even if the app kept buzzing with more orders, Daniel pedaled with a new awareness. He was no longer just another forgotten face in traffic. He was proof that, inside the anonymous routine, there were silent heroes who carried much more than bags. They carried lives. And you, have you ever stopped to think how many invisible heroes cross your life every day without you noticing? What would you say to Daniel if you could meet him now? Leave your opinion in the comments. I really want to know. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That way you show you value those who fight in silence and still follow other real stories that deserve to be heard. Stay tuned for another emotional story of another delivery man.